The first position I was in was as the Buckeye Valley Board of Education member, and that was the first time a woman was elected to that position.
I was the first woman mayor in Delaware, and it was about 1995.
Did you encounter opposition as the first female mayor?
There was actually a comment that you'll never be able to get anything done.
At job fairs and things, they would have like physics and chemistry and astronomy in a room, and they'd say male only. And like if I went in, they'd just kick me out like I was, a criminal or something.
My husband and I always joked about this, that I should get a t-shirt that says, "I'm that woman." Because people either said, "I'm not voting for that woman," or "I'm voting for that woman." So I was that woman.
Women are generally trusted and seen as hardworking organizers. And I think that helps us.
I think a lot of patients like seeing a woman, especially
Okay.
women patients, but not exclusively women
Yeah.
patients. Women listen. They're better, overall, I think they're better listeners. And that's really what people need.
When you started, there were not a whole lot of female officers. Do you think it's a good career for women?
I think it is. If that's what you want to do, don't let anybody stop you.
I would tell people, get yourself in front, get a space at the table. It doesn't matter whether you're female or male, get yourself there, because if you're qualified for the job, they're not going to know it unless they see you.
I'm co-chair with Erin Cowan for the Historical Society's Oral History Committee. We've done 3 oral history projects in the past several years. One concerned the Little Brown Jug race. One continues to involve interviews with longtime employees at businesses that have been in continuous operation in Delaware County for 100+ years. And this project that you'll hear about tonight, which is First Women of Delaware County. Karen's the one who developed the idea of interviewing women who broke through glass ceilings in professions that were male-dominated. She conducted all the interviews, and she put this program together. Before I introduce Karen and start off the program, I want to acknowledge the sponsorship of this evening's event by the law firm of Manus, Martin, and Pegram. Also Willowbrook, thank you. And many thanks to those folks. Now I'm going to turn this program over to Karen. She will tell you about how First Women of Delaware County Oral History Project came to be, and she'll introduce you to the ladies that you see here. So take it away, Karen.
Is this not just cool? Yes! I'm Karen Cowan, and I'm a volunteer at the Delaware County Historical Society, past board member. And I don't think Kathy knows this, but because I never told her when we interviewed her. But Kathy's picture came up somewhere when we were working at Kreider, and somebody said, "She was the first police chief in Delaware. We need to interview her." And then we started brainstorming people, and that was probably about a year ago. And that discussion happened over, we need to do this First Woman project. And so finally I said, I'll do it. And then after having the interviews, I said, we need to get these women here. I'm really excited about having them here because we history people usually talk about people who aren't around anymore. They're here. You can ask them questions. You can talk to them. There's just some things in life that it's really cool. And this project is ongoing. So if anybody knows anybody who was a first female in Delaware County, just tell them to give me a call or send it to the Historical Society. Love to interview. Absolutely love to interview. Let's see what else was I going to say. Tonight we're going. As Dick said, I interviewed all these women, and that's when I said we've got to have them here. We're going to talk about some insights that they have into going into careers that are not traditional careers. And although they're all women going into what at that point in time were male careers, I think some of the things that they're going to talk about also apply to males going into non-traditional careers. I mean, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, men were nurses. Now they're like, half. Men didn't become administrative assistants. Now they do. So it's not just a female going into non-traditional male careers, but I think a lot of things they're going to talk about can be transcended. We're going to do the program a little bit different than our normal programs. First, because they're here, we can talk to them. I've got some questions prepared, and so we're going to have a discussion. And so they're going to give their experiences, their stories, their opinions on things. Then we're going to have a little break. We always do this little commercial type thing, and Ralph's going to do our commercial for us because Donna's on vacation this week. And then when we come back, I'm going to open it up for questions, for comments, to hear your stories. If you have any kind of stories that relate to what they're talking about. Brad's recording, so we're going to get all these on. We'll video all of it. I want to thank Bev Larson for doing the PowerPoint. So if you haven't had a chance, just go over after the program and look at the PowerPoint. It's got the bios of all of the ladies on it. And I want to thank Brad for doing the recording. He did all the recordings for all the interviews. And Ralph was my wingman for all this kind of stuff, electronic stuff. So thanks, guys, for helping. Let's get started so that you can meet the first women of Delaware County. Oh, I'm so excited. I'm going to have them introduce themselves so that you can get a chance to hear them. We're going to pass the microphone around. We've got 2 mics. It might be a little difficult at times. But I think the way we're set up, you're going to be able to hear it a little easier than if we were set up this way. Plus, if you notice, there's no polls, so you don't have to, Okay, so Mary, you want to start, and then we'll just come down? Sure. Here. Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Mary Fleming. I have grown up in Delaware County. My ancestor was actually the first permanent settler in Brown Township where I live today. I've been engaged in farming my entire life there. I've raised 4 children. I have 6 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren. When I got involved as a first woman, I ran for the Buckeye Valley Board of Education. I was the first woman president, and when I finished that term, I decided, hey, this is kind of interesting. I ran for the Soil and Water Conservation Board, was the first woman elected to that board, and the first woman president of that board. Later in my nursing career, I joined the National Institute for Farm Safety. It was an illustrious group of agricultural engineers, all male. There were about 3 of us women who joined the organization when I joined that organization as a nurse working on farm safety projects. So I've done a couple different things over the years and enjoyed all of it, and I feel kind of honored and blessed to be part of this illustrious group in front of you.
Thank you.
Oh, goodness. A tough act to follow. Okay.
Wait, before Alice talks, there's a disclaimer. She is not the first female physician in Delaware County.
Right. Just the other ladies up here are genuine firsts. I am not. But I guess I got recruited into this because when I started practicing in Delaware County in Sunbury, there were very few women doctors practicing in Delaware County. So, and I am the first graduate of the OSU, Ohio State Family Medicine Residency Program, which was not started until 1974 by Dr. Tenny Williams. Some of you may remember him, practiced here in Delaware for 25 years. He saw that there was a need to train family physicians, and so he started that program. So I am the first person there. But anyway, I'm a transplant from Connecticut. I came to Ohio to go to medical school many years ago. Married an Ohioan, so here I am. And besides, I practiced in Sunbury for 22 years, and both before that and after that, I was down at Ohio State on the family medicine faculty also have worked a couple other clinics and stuff over the years. And now I'm retired. I'm married to a physician, and we have 3 daughters, none of whom went into medicine for obvious reasons. But who are very accomplished young ladies, and we have 5 wonderful grandchildren.
Thank you, Alice.
Hi, my name is Debbie Martin. I grew up in Columbus, went to Capital University, and from there to Ohio Dominican University. I taught British literature. That really gets you ready for being a commissioner. But I taught British literature in New Albany before anyone ever heard of New Albany. We moved to Delaware County, my husband, my son, and I, in 1978. Correct? 78. So we've been here like 46 years, a while. And as a lot of you know, sometimes it's kind of hard to break into Delaware County. And who's that newcomer?
Yeah.
You know, and that was a battle for a while, being a newcomer. I did a lot of volunteer work. My son graduated from college, and I was 40 years old, and I'm like, well, I gotta do something. And I did a lot of volunteering with social services and some of the charities here in Delaware, and they are the people who encouraged me to run for county commissioner, because they felt that their areas were not getting the attention that they deserved, and that enough wasn't being done for or recognized in the way of families and what families needed in the health department and things like that. I was elected in 1996, took office in 97, and was commissioner for 2 terms. It falls under, and we were just talking about this, I'm glad I did it, and I'm glad I'm going. And things were very different then, very different. We did not have the divisiveness that we have now. Nobody said, are you a Democrat? Are you a Republican? There was none of that. So I thought I was prepared to be county commissioner. I was wrong. Even though I got elected pretty much in the primary, and so I had all that time to go to the meetings and learn, but you learn on the job, you listen to people, you hire the best you can, and work with them, and that's what I did, and I'm proud of what we did. I went back in 2009 as the first female county administrator, because due to some unusual circumstances, there were 3 brand new county commissioners. And they were, and the administrator left in a hurry. And they needed someone, and I went back. I said I'd do it for 3 months, and 6 months later, I said, guys, I'm going to Florida. You know, that's all there is to it. And they got an excellent, excellent county administrator, and then, so that's my story. I retired, and I'm at home here and in Florida, and happy camper.
Hi, I'm Joan Lawrence, and I represented all of Delaware County and several other counties in the legislature, and had a wonderful time doing it. I actually, when it comes to being first, the legislature was one thing, but 15 years prior, I had run for school board at Big Walnut and served 1 term. And I remember going to the editor of the paper and telling him I was planning to run for school board, and he said, oh, that's good, we don't have women running. He said, of course you won't win. And I just want you to know I didn't come in first. But anyway, I served on the board, and at at some point in those 4 years, I thought, this isn't where the decisions are being made about funding, about policies. I've just got to eventually run for the legislature. And 15 years later, I did. But, and it was quite a, the primary was the battle, as you say. It was an open seat, and there were 5 of us running, 3 from Delaware County. And I still remember winning that first primary. My husband and I, whenever we went out to dinner for the next 10 years, maybe 20 years, he'd toast the victory. That's enough for me.
I am Kathy Lieske, and as it's been pointed out, I was very honored to serve 25 years with the Delaware City Police Department. And through those 25 years, it was a bit easy to be the first female when you're the only female pretty much on the department. I started out, I was a skinny little kid, grew up in Northwest Ohio, not too far from Toledo, Port Clinton. I graduated from the University of Toledo, and at that point, right before I was supposed to graduate, I called my parents to come to the university and have supper one night. And at that point, I kind of broke it to them that, you know, you guys paid for 3.5 years of my tuition to be in the College of Education to be a teacher, but I don't want to be a teacher. I'd rather be a Adam 12. I'd rather be a police department. And they were disappointed, obviously, but I told them, look, I've got a part-time job working at UPS, and so I can afford to put my way through that last year, because most of the major courses I'd already taken, and it was just a matter of taking some police-related courses. So within a year, I graduated with a degree, which I promptly gave to my parents, because they did most of the work. And right before I graduated, as a matter of fact, I went window shopping for agencies, and a couple years before that I had spent a summer in Ashland and really fell in love with the county, with the terrain, just people and so forth. So that was one of my first stops, was to the Sheriff's Department, and I got an appointment. I walked in, I said, hi, I'm Kathy Lieske, and I want to be a deputy. And he said, well, when do you want to start? This is easy. So I started with the Sheriff's Department. They broke me in with his wife, who took care of the records and so forth. And so I got the paperwork, because sheriffs, they issue a lot of paperwork and subpoenas and stuff like that. So I broke in there and spent half my time there, and the other half trading spots with a really neat older deputy. His name was Fuzzy Bun Figlio. And he was a good mentor. He looked just like you would expect a Fuzzy Bun Figlio. And a couple years later, I was getting a little itchy and decided, maybe head out for some greener pastures. And right before I left Ashland, Fuzzy said to me one day, he says, you know what the guys called you, right? You know what your nickname was? And I said, got no idea, He says, you were the dickless deputy. I said, okay. So, yeah, that's true. So I no lie. Well, anyway, from there, I decided, I wanted to go to, like I said, some greener pastures, because at Ashland, I was making a grand total of about $7,200 a year. Not a month, a year, $7,200. And that was back in the mid-'70s, so wasn't that bad. So I left and I came down to Columbus thinking all the metropolitan police departments, they are here. We've got the Highway Patrol, we've got the Columbus Police Department. I've got an education, I've got a degree, I've got experience, I'm a female, they're looking for diversity, should be a snap. 6 civil service tests later in 2 years, I finally managed to find Delaware as my home. It was going to be my last civil service test. It was as if I got the word, Lord. I said, I probably screwed it when I left Ashland without some real plans, but he allowed me to land in Delaware, and like I said, I've been there for 25 years. Retired in 2001, and that's a little bit of it.
So Kathy, it took you a while to find the greener pastures. and all the time before. But I'm glad you found them, because she was my police chief. So you weren't alone there. All right, so I'm Julie Secrest, and I'm here because I was mayor of Delaware in 1995 to 2000 about, and it seems like yesterday. But I grew up in Columbus, went to Ohio State, and then my husband and I moved here with 4 sons in 1973, a little bit before Deb. But Deb stayed longer, so that evens out. So, and I first actually ran for county commissioner, because I read in the newspaper that Democrats didn't have any candidates. So I said, I'll do it. And they said, oh, good. Because there weren't that many Democrats in Delaware. So, and I did not make that. I ran against Boot Sheets the first time. But I didn't make county commissioner. But Dennis Davis, who was then mayor of Delaware, said, why don't you run for city council? And that's how I ended up at city council. And then in city council, the council votes the mayor. And so that's how I got to be mayor. And in the meantime, I was teaching 5th grade. And I started at Conger Elementary and ended up at Schultz. And sometimes I taught 4th grade, sometimes 3rd. But we had this big peace project. So that's how I was motivated to get into politics. And I don't know how that all came about, other than the fact that we had the children organize on the football field in the shape of a globe, and they held flashlights. And the idea was that we could have a peaceful world. The children would ask for peace, and if we all lit our light. And that worked. So, and we did for a while have signs at the beginning of it, at the start of the town, the city, that says Delaware City of Peace. And that was the result of the students, and then I wanted to get involved in, in the real world. So I spent a year in Governor Celeste's office. And at the time, because a friend of mine was running in the primary and needed votes, I became a Republican. So I could vote for what's her name. And they said, now, do you agree with everything the Republicans think? And I said, oh, sure. But then I reverted that. So I'm now, but I think I'm an independent who votes a D, but don't tell anybody. So after that, I was also house mother at Kappa Alpha Theta on West Winter Street. I was there for 14 years and taught the 5th grade, and that was it until I retired, and then I lived with my son and his wife for about a year. Oh, I have to say, I have 3 great-grandchildren here today. I should have you guys stand up. And Cora Lucille is the youngest. So she is the youngest, woman. She's the youngest female here, and then I have Braylon and Cooper, and they go to Buckeye Valley. So I want to thank them for coming, and thank you, Karen, too. I think that covers, and I'm now retired.
Karen has to say something. I screwed up her name. She's not Irena Carpenter, which I have up there. It's Irena Scott. And I can't figure out why I put Carpenter, except I'm thinking now Scott Carpenter wasn't even an astronaut. Okay. I'm sorry, Irena. Right, Irena Scott.
I'm the oddball. I'm the Christmas tree owner, and this is Alan Blair's LLC, and it's no longer in operation. We sold the place to Preservation Parks, and our park is the Cannon Creek Park, and it includes the Delaware County Bicentennial Barn, and that's where I grew up. And our farm actually started about 1803 or something, way back. But my career took place elsewhere besides Christmas tree farming. I got my PhD from the College of Veterinary Medicine, University of Missouri, did postdoctoral work at Cornell, and was a professor at St. Bonaventure University. I also worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency as a photogrammetrist. I've worked at a number of universities, including Ohio State and at Battelle, in the Ohio Department of Health. I was an astronomer at the Big Ear, which used to be here in Delaware County. It was wonderful. I always wanted to be an astronomer, but we didn't let females in them. I was a correspondent for Popular Mechanics. And I was probably the first female here and there, but not in Delaware County. I'm still working, kind of. I'm still like a reviewer for scientific societies and journals and things like that, and I'm still publishing a little bit. And I became a writer, and a couple of my books that might be interesting. One is about John Purdue, and it tells a whole lot about this area, a lot about history of this area. John Purdue at Purdue University, and it was published by the Purdue University Press. And another one I just wrote, it's called Aliens and the Apocalypse, and it's a book in disguise because what I say would be controversial, but it's about women. And so it's disguised as an alien book. And so I'm saying that the aliens is like females instead of big men running around in spacesuits. And so I was saying this draws attention to females. And I was including a lot of information about females that nobody knows, such as controversial things such as maybe females founded the human race instead of men running around with spears. And maybe females had a whole lot to do with evolution, cooperative behavior, instead of that Darwinian survival of the fittest and fighting and everything. So if you want to know about females, read this because it tells a lot of things that nobody knows.
Wow, I don't know how I am sitting up here. These guys have so much more to say. I'm a transplant. My name's Babiasz, and I came to Delaware in 2006 with my husband as a relocation. I was born and raised in Philadelphia, PA, went to St. Joseph's University with a degree in sociology, and I worked at 2 other financial institutions before I came. My first, as many of you have probably read my bio, I was the first female president and board member of Fidelity Federal Savings and Loan, and that is an institution that is still active in Delaware 137 years. So I'm pretty proud of that fact. And I worked there from 2006 until 2022. I just retired. I have 2 children and 4 grandchildren, and I'm still around here. So.
Thank you. I sent some questions to the ladies, and so we'll go through some of them, and whoever wants to answer, just raise your hand or whatever, or I can direct. But when did you realize that you wanted to do something that was not traditional, a not traditional female role? Kathy, I think when you talked about knowing way early in your childhood. You want to talk a little bit about that?
I made the comment about Adam 12. That was a cop show in the early 60s, and it did have an influence on me, and that really is what kind of stoked my interest in taking up law enforcement. Back then, the police officers were pictured as being friendly and helping you, and if you ever have troubles, go to the police officer and he'll take care of you. A little bit different than the situations we find ourselves in today. But that's what stoked it. My mother had a cousin who was a gregarious police officer in Maumee. I used to listen to his stories at the family gatherings, and then I had a cousin who also was a police officer, and he was the first one that ever let me shoot his pistol. So then I hit the target, so I thought, well, that seems to be a good sign. But as far as my endeavors really didn't take into account whether I would be the first this or the first that. My sole objective was to get into a profession where I could serve my community, where I could be of help and assistance, someplace that had some respect, obviously. But it really was never my intention when I started in the profession to find my way up the ladder. I usually tell folks I probably should have stopped at sergeant, because that's the neatest. That's just the right ring of a position in a police department. It's right there in the middle where you can tell others what to do, and you can always blame the upper echelon.
Did any of you? Yeah.
And I have a question for all of you, because I think, Kathy, you and I are coming from the same place. I never thought about the fact that it was male-dominated and that I was doing something like that. I did it because I thought I could do a better job. And whether it was a male or a female never crossed my mind. It was just, this is what I'm going to do. So, how about you guys?
Well, I had sort of a different experience. When I was about 14, one of our neighbors was over visiting, and she said, well, Alice, what do you think you might like to do when you grow up, So I said, well, I want to be a nurse. I'd like to be a nurse. I'm interested in biology. I'm interested in helping people. She said, well, have you ever thought about being a doctor? I said, girls can do that? I didn't know that existed. I grew up in a small town in Connecticut, about 5,000 people. There were 2 docs in town. They were both men. And this was before I was aware about Elizabeth Blackwell or any of these women who went into medicine. So it wasn't so much that I was aiming to break into a, different profession. It was just that it was completely off my radar at that point.
I actually always wanted to be a nurse, and I did retire after 47 years as a registered nurse. So that was my career choice, and it was something that I don't remember actually making a choice. I had twin sisters born on my birthday when I was 3. When they were 1 month old, I carried both girls downstairs. I had bottles and the pan of water on the stove, and I was going to feed the babies. And I've been taking care of people ever since in my nursing career. When I chose to run for the Board of Education, it was a different interest. It wasn't about being first. There were a lot of us in the community of Buckeye Valley who were complaining about the schools at the time, and especially in the Kilburn area where I live. I realized I was being a very bad example to my daughters, to just be complaining about everything and not doing anything to make things better. And I said, you know, I really need to do something to make it better. If I spent all this time complaining about it, I need to be a better role model for my daughters. So it was really more about improving things, because I thought I could improve things like you. Do a better job than it was about being first. But it was very interesting to be first.
Well, so many things go through my mind, it's hard to keep it organized. But I had the same experience that Mary did. I had worked for many years with the League of Women Voters. I would say the League of Women Voters really was my life, along with my family. We spent so much time with it. But I worked as a lobbyist and helped write the periodic newsletter criticizing the legislature, always criticizing the legislature for what they were doing or not doing or doing wrong or whatever. And at some point with an open seat coming up in 1982, I thought, quit complaining, get yourself elected and see if you can do any better. And that's exactly what I did. And it was quite a battle to get there, but it sure was worth it. And I hope I did make a difference, and I'm not going to go into that.
So let's talk about some of the challenges that you ladies faced as you didn't do this because you were the first, but you were the first. What were some of the challenges that you faced, Anna?
So in banking, as you know, there's a lot of females that work in banking, but they're usually your tellers or your branch managers, and then you get to the upper roles like president, there aren't many females. So it's difficult to do that. Now, where I was working, that wasn't a problem. But once you got out into the industry, then you found yourselves put on a board because you were a female. So you would say, well, am I on this position because they need that token female, or is it because I'm the right person to be on this? So to me, that was a challenge.
Okay. Irena?
Well, when I was about 3 years old, I was interested in the stars. And then I got to grade school and I found out that was astronomy.
We have some issues.
Oh, okay. When I was about 3 years old, I was interested in the stars. And when I got in grade school, I found out that I wanted to be an astronomer. And so when people ask, what are you going to do? I would say, I want to be an astronomer. Everybody would laugh at me and say no, and I remember I got corrected in school and say, you're not going to be an astronomer. And so I kept on wishing I'd be an astronomer, and I majored in it in college. And then I started looking for jobs, and like in the employment fairs and things like that, they would have a booth that says for physics and astronomy and chemistry, male only. And if I walked in, well, they would treat me like I was a criminal and push me back out. So I had to change my major, and I still kept trying to get into astronomy and going into mapping and things like that, where they're mapping other planets, but I didn't get there. And so finally I had a degree in veterinary medicine before they were letting females into astronomy. And so anyway, I worked my way through school and needed to support myself, and that wasn't astronomy since I couldn't get a job. But that's what I always wanted to do, and I was very, very, very disappointed. But I did work as a volunteer at the Big Ear, and then they sold the land out from under the Big Ear.
Of all the interviews that we did, probably Irena's was the one that there were more obstacles, lots of obstacles put in her way to do, it wasn't the tree farm, but it was the thing that she wanted to do as her career. There were obstacles put in her way that I know a lot of us can relate to. It was yeah, there were a lot. Anybody else with obstacles, things that you think?
Well, I was thinking about it. I agree with the people I've heard up to this point that I just thought I would run for a position. I didn't think about being a woman until I got to be mayor. And, well, first of all, you may all remember Melba Hunter. And Melba was vice mayor. She was on the council and she got sick. And so it came time to elect a new mayor, and she encouraged me to be mayor. But then when I got to be mayor, the team wasn't real cooperative. Let me say that. I don't know how many people remember those days, but that's when I found the challenge of being a woman, and they had a nickname for me. It wasn't quite as clever as yours. But it was the old gray mare. So that was how my council looked at me. So it was quite a ride through those days.
Anybody else want to talk? Alice? Here, I'll hand this up.
So I guess the biggest obstacle I had in college was that, so I went and took all these terrible courses, you know, organic chemistry, physics, calculus, the whole smear, because you needed to do that to go to medical school, right? And you had to get good grades, which meant you had to spend, instead of socializing, you had to study. So, so I talked to my junior year, I talked to my college advisor about taking the medical college admission test and so forth. He says, oh, girls don't go to medical school.
What year was this?
1967. So I said, well, screw that. I mean, I didn't say that to him, but so I went to one of my other professors who was a much more open-minded individual. He said, oh, that's a bunch of baloney. He says, my daughter's in medical school at such and such a school, you know, university, and I'll write you a letter. And so I took the test, and they had you take it actually in the spring of your junior year and again in the fall of your senior year, because there's a course you haven't taken yet in that spring that your grade's going to be lower on the spring testing. So anyway, I don't remember what I got, but it must have been good enough because I got into medical school. But so that's one example. The other, of course, bigger obstacle, I think, with when you're sort of breaking this barrier is your own self-doubt about whether you can do the job, whether you can measure up. It's usually not justified, but you get the vibes from your, like, when I went to medical school, only 10% of the class were women. And there were guys in the class who came up to me and told me I'd taken their friend's place, that I didn't belong there. So it's, you know, that kind of thing, which you basically just have to put your head down and keep going.
Yeah.
Real quick, when I was elected and I went into office, and when I was elected, there were two of us, a male and myself, who were elected. So it was a year of two. And the night that he and I were elected, another elected official called John Kasich and said, I can deal with this man. I can take him under my wing and I can help him. What am I going to do with this woman? He told me the story later, and we became friends.
Well, just a quick word. It occurs to me that I didn't have total obstacles. When I decided I was going to run for the legislature in June and July of 1982, I made an appointment with George Hoffman, the chair of the county Republican Party, went up to Buns and sat and talked to him and told him what I was planning to do, and he was nothing but supportive.
Excellent.
And that's I mean, I don't know that it translated into anything except it was nice to have that support.
So on that note, who helped? How did you get help to do this? Because there were obstacles. Yeah.
So my father was also bank president, and I worked with him for 10 years in a small bank. I mean, it was 10 million in assets, which, you know, Fidelity Federal is 10 times bigger than that. So I learned how to do everything from, you name it. I learned how to do everything in banking. So those first 10 years were really important for that in his role. But then when I came to Fidelity Federal, I had a couple other of the board members that were very much mentors for me.
I wanted to say that what was important about running was the use of volunteers. I said I had one in Big Walnut. Well, what I did in August of '82, I remember how it all played out. I called about 5 or 6 people who had worked with me on the school board election, who put up yard signs and all those nuts and bolts things. And they came to my house and we talked about whether I should run. And I asked them if they'd work for me and do all sorts of chores that I had outlined. And I ended up with a group of about 6 or 8. And boy, did they ever work.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful. It was a wonderful experience.
And that was a different time, and it was my time too, and people just helped me. I didn't know what I was doing, and it was kitchen table, and they helped me. And Democrats helped me. I know, it was just amazing. And yes, I always said I was going to get a t-shirt that said, "I'm that woman." Because when I went door to door, I'd go to the meetings and so on, you'd hear people go, "I'm going to vote for that woman." But then you'd hear, "I'm not voting for a woman." And I was that woman.
Alice.
Yes, I was fortunate enough to have, faculty that mentored female, mostly female, but also some very supportive men on the faculty. And in my residency programs, Dr. Williams, who started this family practice program, he was way ahead of his time in his attitudes. He was just a wonderful, wonderful guy. I had a supportive husband, although he doesn't cook, but he was supportive. And so you do run into, and patience, even patience, women patients particularly, who maybe been in a similar situation, understand some of the challenges you have that any working woman has when she has children at home or parents to look after or maybe a sibling to look after. They know how hard this can be.
Mary?
I think one of the interesting things for me was generally I had 2 groups of supporters. First, I invited a lot of community leaders to help me in my campaign for the school board. And those people continued to be supportive as I worked into the role responsibilities. Second group was more the men than the women, and that was an interesting thing to me. It was especially interesting because I defeated an incumbent who later came back on the board with me. And at the time I left the board, I received a really nice thank you from this gentleman acknowledging that he felt I had done an excellent job as a woman on the Board of Education.
Okay. Who else? Anybody else want to talk about the help that they received? No? No?
I'd just like to say that my husband was very supportive in all of this, and for most of you don't know this, but it occurs to me for those who did know my husband, he died on New Year's Eve 2019.
And I will say my husband did too. He was right there. And, yeah, he's here. And he kept writing the checks to keep me afloat. Yeah, he was king of the microwave. I lost 12 pounds going door to door, and he said he lost more.
I think it's kind of interesting that the majority of this group, well, not like half are maybe not have political, I mean, school board and county commissioner, but then Alice is more into the private sector, Anna, and Irena's private sector, school. So we do have a nice variety of people here that, and it'd be a nice variety of occupations and fields that people went into.
I was asked if I was from the right party when I ran for the school board, which was interesting because it's not a political position when you're running.
Were you?
Probably 1986, 87.
So how did your families play a part in this? Did they help? Did they cook? Did they watch the kids? Or were you kind of on your own with that? Or
I think I have probably the most interesting family story when it comes to families' involvement in my choices. I grew up on a family farm. There were 5 girls. People used to tease us about being Bill's boys. We learned to do any and every job that needed to be done on a 1,500-acre farm. We plowed the fields, we raised the animals, we milked the cows, we fed the pigs. We did virtually every job that needed to be done on that farm at a time when women were not the primary farmer. And most people thought it was pretty unusual to see 5 of us girls basically running the family farm with Dad's oversight. But Dad's expectations and Mom's expectations that we do what job needs done was a really important thing for us growing up on that farm. I think Dad and my grandfather's involvement in politics also kind of set the stage for me. Grandpa used to be known as Mr. Republican in the county, which in this county was a big deal at the time. My dad served as a township trustee for 47 years, so when I decided to run for a position, it wasn't really a big surprise to me at the time that I was able to do that. I did ask Dad in his later years if he was really a woman's liver or if we just did all those farm chores because he didn't have any sons. Dad grinned like some of you are now, and he said, "Really?" He said it was both. He said, "I didn't see any reason you girls couldn't do all those jobs that needed to be done." And then he grinned again and he said, "And I didn't have any boys either."
I can't say my family played much of a role in my choice. My mother discouraged it, actually. And my parents were divorced, so I didn't have much contact with my father. So it was pretty much, I just went out and did it.
Pretty self-motivated.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very cool. That's very cool.
Doing this program and another one that I worked on about my career had ended up revealing something to me that I had not known, and I'm not sure I wanted to know it. But what I found was, from talking to my daughter and my sons, that I really did quite a bit of ignoring of family problems. I did let that go. I mean, I always got the meals on, but I missed the track meet. I just wasn't there. And I don't even remember not being there. And that's really bad. So you lose something in doing the public service. It's not all success and happiness. And I really had not thought it through.
There are sacrifices. I mean, yeah, there are absolutely sacrifices.
I am an only child, so I was the apple of my dad, in my dad's eyes. And mother was a constant worrier about that I was going to be all right. As I mentioned, I surprised them with saying, this is where I want to go. This is what I want to do. So they were disappointed, in that regard. However, when I got my degree and I gave it to them, that was something that we all shared with one another, that, this is something that as a family we accomplished. And then as the years went by and it was obvious that I had chosen a profession that I was going to be successful in. My father, he kind of turned quite a bit to say that he used to brag. Mom told me later on, he said, oh yeah, he used to brag about his daughter's a sergeant. Unfortunately, he passed away before I attained the chief's position or even the captain's, as far as that goes. But my mother was there through all the steps. She was the one that pinned my stars on my collar at my various taking over those positions. So all in all, she worried a lot, but I think any mother who has an only child or even one or two, it's difficult for them. They want to protect us, and for my purpose, I'm on the end that I'm supposed to be protecting you, technically, as a community. So.
Kind of worked out.
Well, during the time that I was mayor, having 4 sons, 2 of my sons were married and we had some small grandchildren, and then 2 were in high school or college. And so it was kind of like a little bit of time where I could do something in that. And this, I don't know if I should tell this or not, but I ran my campaign out of the sorority house. I don't think I had permission. It was in the basement of the sorority house, and so I had teachers who helped, or sorority girls who helped, but I appreciated all of it.
Well, I grew up on a farm, and what we did was work, and that was our hobby, and what we spent our time doing and everything else. And I wanted to be an astronomer, and nobody in my family was anything like that. My parents wanted me to grow up and get married and do housework. So I was a disappointment to them, but at least I got a degree from a vet school. I never even thought of becoming a vet. I just wanted the academic work, but then never got into much I wanted to do though, but I had a lot of jobs.
And I don't want to take too much of the time, but I am also one of 7, 5 girls. And I have a sister that's a dentist, a sister that's a CPA, a sister that is a nurse, and a sister that works for a financial advisory company. So we were all pretty successful. And one of the things my mom said when I had my daughter was, don't clip her wings. And that was really important thing. And I've married my husband for 42 years, and he's been very supportive. He's not here tonight. He's been very supportive otherwise.
So it's almost 8 o'clock and we need to do a little bit break, but I have one final question for all of you. What advice would you give somebody who's thinking about going into a non-traditional career?
Try to do what you want to regardless of the obstacles, because the world has changed. People can now go into astronomy.
And I would say just to be prepared for whatever it is that you want, and then it won't matter what your gender is.
My advice specifically goes out to those 2 young gentlemen right there, and that young lady back there in the middle. For you too, when you've got a lot of obstacles ahead of you in this world, and don't let anybody tell you you can't do what you want to do. If it's in your heart to do it, you go and do it, okay?
Running for the legislature is not really doing the untraditional thing, because there are a lot of women now running, and I counted the number, 29 out of 99 are now women. That's about twice as many as when I was there, and growing. And so the advice I'd have for someone considering running, especially a woman, is run for something else first. Run for township trustee, run for school board, city council, get a base of support, and then you go up. I mean, it's just a big help to do it that way. And I have lots of other advice if you have anyone.
And I'm right there with Kathy. If you want to do it, go out there and do it. Don't let anybody stop you. Don't doubt yourself because you thought you could do it. Keep that in mind. Do it.
Now, I guess I have to echo both Kathy and Deb. The other thing I think is helpful is to get some experience, maybe shadowing someone in the profession that you're interested in, either in, they used to have this father takes a daughter to work day. In fact, one of our girls did that one time, and they came home and said, I ain't doing what Dad does. He was an invasive cardiologist. So. but the main thing is like what Deb and Kathy said, was to just make up your mind if this is what you want to do, find out what steps you got to take, and don't let somebody tell you that you can't do it and take that on face value. Of course, in medicine now, the classes are over half women, so it's changed a lot.
I think I echo a lot of the same sentiments, but I have an interesting way maybe of telling the story. I was told I couldn't do something because I was a woman well after I had been the board presidents of 2 different organizations. And I remember being shocked that somebody would say you can't do that because you're a woman. What happened in my life, at one point I was feeling sorry because I couldn't do something I wanted to do. And then I kind of had this epiphany. Well, you idiot. If it's important enough, figure out a way you're going to do it. If it's not important enough, then let it go and forget about it. Make conscious choices and figure out what do you want to do and how are you going to do it. And go get the world. It's out there for you.
I remember when I was going to go into grad school, and I was going to go into industrial psychology, and I went to Bowling Green State University because they had a good industrial psych program, and the chair of the department looked at me and said, a married lady with 2 children should not apply because you are not going to do very well here. And so I said, same thing somebody else said, screw you. And didn't go into psych, went into organizational communication, organizational development, and did pretty well. Ended up traveling to Europe a lot with it. But and I had that guy for a class probably about 3 years later, and I just stared at him and cussed at him under my breath. I'll show you I can't do this. Any questions for any of the ladies? Yes?
This isn't a question. It's just something to Julie. When Bob was on city council, you gave each of the councilmen peace candles, and we still have them.
That's very cool. Very cool.
I'm glad to know that.
Hold on, okay, yes.
I simply want to say congratulations to all of you. I believe I know 4 of you pretty well. That has been good or bad, I don't know. But I think, besides congratulating you, you're to be thanked for all that you have contributed throughout your professional lives and your personal lives for Delaware County. I think it is because of contributions from people like you that Delaware County is now considered one of the best counties to live in the state of Ohio. And I think it is because we have had the good fortune of having women like you in such important positions throughout the county and helping us all to be better citizens, to be a better county. Thank you.
I get to be the Vanna White of this place.
Okay, you guys are all amazing, and I didn't know I needed to hear your stories, so I really appreciate you sharing it with us. I do have a question. You all just seem like really just amazing. Was there ever a time in your journey where the fear of failure or just fear in general just felt like it was going to take you out, or were you just like, I got this from the very beginning? Just curious. And if it did, how did you, face it?
Andrew, I'll start with Dallas and then Kathy and then Joan.
Yes, it's not a smooth journey. Or it hasn't been for me, at least. I actually dropped out of medical school at one point because I thought, I can't do this, I don't want to do it. And tried to get a job at other jobs, and I was overqualified. Nobody wants to hire somebody who's got 2 years of medical school, so. And then finally I ended up getting a job teaching at the University of Toledo, just a short-term thing, and my boss said, Alice, you need to go back to medical school. So I did. That was the one time. Another time was after I was in practice in Sunbury, and it started in November of '81, and the economy tanked right after that. There was a recession, builders were going belly up and so forth. We had a 4-year-old and an 18-month-old. Third child had not been born yet. And it was overwhelming. I was in solo practice, okay, little tiny building in Sunbury. There were only 2 doctors in Sunbury at that time. And I got super, super depressed. But fortunately, I was able to come out of that and carry on. And then I got pregnant. Oh dear. However, everything worked out great. But yes, I think you can expect, and I think this is true for men and women, your career path is not going to be a smooth ride. But it's always a learning experience, okay? So you learn something, and for everything that you go through, you end up getting something out of it and learning it. And I was very bad at not asking for help. That's an outgrowth of my childhood. I basically took care of me and my brother growing up for many years. And, I'm not good at asking for help. I'm not good at delegating. So those are both 2 skills that you should develop no matter what you do. So, but, yeah.
And the third one is say no when they ask you.
I haven't learned that one.
Just say no.
I have sort of a long story, but I still remember it as though it just happened. I remember there was a proposal to do a high-speed rail system in Ohio, and Ohio was pushing ahead as fast as they could because they were going to get $2 billion, I think, from the feds. And anyway, there had to be a bill passed to authorize what we were doing. And this is a subject on which I had spent a lot of time, deficit financing for the state. And so I worked on my little speech, and I stood up and started to talk. And I don't know how many of you spent time watching the legislature, but when we're in session, everybody's talking to everybody else. It doesn't matter that there's a speaker speaking. Anyway, I'm speaking and speaking and speaking and speaking and telling them why it's unconstitutional to do what they're planning to do and that we can't do it. And in the meantime, the speaker's looking at me with his gavel saying, sort of, sit down already. So I did. And I went home that night and I sat on the couch, pulled the blanket up over my head and said to Wayman, why am I doing this? What a waste of time. I mean, I got nowhere. Okay. So they passed the bill. It was enacted. It was challenged in court. And about 4 months later, the court said what I said. Okay. Next part of the story. Another proposal to do some fancy work with our finances to allow us to borrow short-term within the biennium. I thought it wasn't a bad idea, but it's unconstitutional. We can't do it. We have to ask the public if they want us to do it. But I got up with my little speech, and you could hear a pin drop. Everyone was listening. And I defeated the proposal. And the speaker was livid. Livid. Said, got my leadership in his office and said, why didn't you tell me she was going to do that? I said, we didn't know. Anyway, it too passed eventually and was challenged in court and was thrown out for the same reason. So, hence I got a decent reputation for knowing something about something. Anyway, but I'll never forget that, going home and just being sure I should just give up. But I didn't.
Well, I learned that life isn't a bowl of cherries, that you do get some pits sometimes. It was my first year's police chief. I was headed into my first budget, going before city council. Something came up that I had not been made aware of, and so during my presentation, I apologized to council saying, you know, this is my first go around. I don't know I'm exactly correct, you know, in presenting it like I am, but, and I went on to present what I wanted to try and correct. And I had I didn't neglect. I honestly did not tell my city manager because I didn't want him to try and talk me out of it. But as it turns out, he had to simmer down, I guess, for 2 days because he was going to fire me. And so we finally got together and we made nice. But anyway, like these two ladies here, I did the depression thing and pulling the covers over my head at night because I usually don't, you know, get defeated, you know, and I think in this particular case I was defeating myself. I was letting other people, you know, control me, and I learned from that too. But like I say, sometimes you get some pits with the cherries.
Just never give up. I think the toughest time for me was working with my council who didn't want to work with me. And so that was like an ongoing depression for like 3 years.
Yeah, I had suicidal depression for all through my life, but I always had a full-time job too. But I was in a different occupation. It's like a woman in science used to be like a witch or something. I mean, like I'm in league with the devil or the devil's handmaid or something. And there's a whole lot of social stigma. There's not as much now, but it's really awful to have everybody look at you like you're, you know, freak and creep or anything like that.
That first bank I worked at, there were the worst 3 months of my life at the end. My father passes away. I get robbed twice, and the bank gets closed for fraud. It was November, and I was without a job, and I said to my husband at 40, whatever I was, 43, what am I going to do now? And 4 months later, another bank called me and said, we want you to come work for us. And I went back into it, and I just went back into it.
I think as a nurse, it's been pretty interesting sometimes. One of our journals one year had the cover story as Why Nurses Eat Their Young. Unfortunately, as nurses, we have a really bad reputation for treating each other badly. that is not well-deserved in some settings, I have to say. And I've had some wonderful opportunities as a nurse. I also had 2 instances when you asked if we were terrified, when life was very, very difficult for me. One really wasn't so much the nurses as we were just in a bad financial situation in society in general, and the hospital was laying off nurses and I was laid off. I didn't know how to deal with that. I'd worked my whole life and been busy my whole life, and it was terrifying because I had a family depending on me. I raised 4 children, we were on the farm, and my check was the important one. That was really hard. When I went back to work, I couldn't get a job at the same salary I had before because I was old enough, people didn't want to hire somebody who was that old. I eventually did find a job doing home care nursing, which I loved dearly. Pay rate was pretty low in comparison to other nursing salaries. In another circumstance, I was in that really bad nursing environment, and that was very, very, very hard. I ended up leaving the position, not something I wanted to do at the time. And I actually kind of wrote a care plan for myself at the time because I was so down and so scared and so upset about the situation that happened. I think you have to expect that things don't always go your way, but sometimes it's really hard to prepare for what isn't going to go your way. So you have to dig in and get busy and try to figure something out. But life can throw you some real curveballs sometimes.
Any other questions? Anybody? It's 20 after 8, so do you know where your kids are? You guys don't remember that. Please, a round of applause for our... And after we interview Ralph's wife and anybody else who's a first lady, we'll do this again. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for participating. Thank you, ladies, for first doing interviews and for being here. This was just cool. Thank you, guys.